I've recorded us. Recorded people film.
So participation, part 2. We're starting with Lucy Stegos.
Shall I start?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Lucy. I'm actually not going to talk. I decided that I didn't feel very comfortable talking about something I'm doing with lots of other people. So what we did is we had lunch on Saturday. This is the end of our lunch. And we recorded our conversation over lunch. At some points we plopped in some of the questions that Christina had invited us to reflect on. So what you're going to listen to, first off, is a 12-minute recording made in an ex-Greek Cypriot working men's club in North London between me, George, Ivan and Anna. So I hope you enjoy it. It's very chopped up and very rough, so just sort of bear with me.
How do we perceive the role of participation?
How do we perceive the role of
Within
participation?
these works, which is more
Within
like
these
maybe within Verosa.
Within Verosa.
Yeah. Okay.
How do we perceive the role of participation within Verosa?
Yeah. I mean, Verosa is a work. Is Verosa a work? It's a project.
It's a project, yeah.
What do you think? Yeah, it's a place.
It's a place, yeah.
It's a place, and I guess like it was never conceived to. The idea was always to engage with people.
Yeah.
But in a very, I think in a very informal and non-forced way.
Mm.
Very casual.
Yeah, maybe very casual, and then.
But I think even within those casual kind of natural ways, there's ways that you have boundaries and you have limits and you sort of have a certain amount of restriction.
I think the curtains, and I think as a space itself, you know, even architecturally, and the curtains and the fact that, you know, it's open and it's closed, and so that always made us curious somehow. But I think, yeah, it was by seeing the Saturday Museum and the sign.
I feel like that sign meant different.
But it's not just the sign, but the space was already a social club. So we sort of added on another layer.
Yeah, rather than kind of
to a space that
invaded.
Yes, but it wasn't like it had the same, almost like same function. It was a very informal way of meeting, interacting. So we sort of didn't quite change the use of the space.
But I think it's quite nice because, in essence, I set up a virtual. The Saturday Museum was a virtual space.
Yeah.
Then you became part of that dialogue about that virtual space, and then you found this physical space, which I've never really thought about before.
Yeah.
And so then there was this kind of natural kind of, I don't know, joining of parties, and then you guys have come and other people have arrived, and it's kind of an accidental community. Maybe? Is that a phrase that could be used?
Yeah. Well, I think kind of going back to what you were saying, I've always had, I could see or sense the informality, being informal, but I've always, and I think this is something we've also kind of talked about, it's informal, but I always felt there is a structure, there is a purpose, it's not aleatory or it's not random. Totally. I think I've always felt that there was a sense of purpose.
It's a place which I'd always been curious, and seeing it from the outside was different than like coming in. And I thought that the space was something that I was familiar with in the past. It seemed as if I'd been to a similar place when I was younger, and it felt like one of those places that your mum would take you to, and you wouldn't feel as if it was your place, it felt like a very adult place, and it felt like you could be a child again. That's sort of
coming here, I've seen it as a place to engage with other people, which is something that we don't seem to find very easily. Is this sense that you can come here and spend the whole afternoon and have conversations and play with things and make things and kind of really kind of gives you a different sense of how you can connect with other people and how you can find, similar interests, or how you can, the day that we were here, there was George, and there was his daughter, and it was us, and some other people. I thought that was really fascinating, and we were all sort of gathering around the carousel and playing with that, and I think that is something that is very unusual nowadays to find.
Yeah, and there's a joy in it. Like, I don't know.
Yes,
for me, there's just absolute joy. But
it's a joy.
I think what's interesting is it's not premeditated. I mean, whilst you are, like, kind of like what you said before about, whilst there is a structure, like George and I will come, with you, or other people or things, there is a structure, but what I like about it is it's such a structure that, like, when Ivan's posting me all these things on Twitter about radio waves and stuff, like, it makes me feel excited. Like, I don't feel like we're always providing the structure. I think the structure kind of
evolves.
Like, this is something I would have never have thought about, but it comes in, and then with the book thing that you guys came with, and then something, and then now my friend who came that day and did the jam, he's like, oh, it was really fun, I'd like to come and do another jam, and that feels like a really nice, but then he's going to bring 2 more people, and it's kind of, maybe it's like cumulative. Interesting.
What's the second question?
Shall we try a different question? Alright. Yeah. Are you guys alright with this? This is fun. And let's try one more. We don't have to do them all if it gets too much.
I think for the second one, let's add another rule to the game. we'll have to keep it to 10 minutes.
Okay.
So let's have that in mind, we'll have the question in mind. I think my impression of a pseudo-participatory type of event is something that it's about the artist and not about the participants.
Yeah.
It's about something that I'm going to share something of my genius with you. Set out all these.
Yeah, and I'm a genius. That's his ego attached to it.
So I don't care about what you do, how you do things, but these are my materials. This is the way I do things. So you can copy the way I do things. And you can take it away with you as a small token of what you've learned from my sort of way of doing practice. So that's very different from what you're talking about now.
It's something to do with control, I think. As soon as you start working with people, you're not in control anymore, and that's the joy of it for me. It's not a negative, it's a positive, and maybe there's something in that about. Whereas I think perhaps when it doesn't work, or when it is pseudo-participatory, it's like when someone feels that they can hold control.
Yeah.
And it's like, we can't.
We tend to go really
rigid.
And
But then I think it goes back to what you were saying right at the beginning, which is like, you do need some structure. Otherwise there's nothing to riff on. If nobody makes say if we didn't make a theme, this weird theme, it's like there's nothing. And I think when we first started, we didn't have that actually, I remember now, and it was like, there was nothing for people to, like the theme almost just acts as an invitation, and it's like, whereas if there isn't something here, there's almost nothing to argue against, or so it's like how to find that balance between that something but not being too kind of narrow.
But I think actually the people as well, and you as agents or facilitators, I think that you actually play an enormous role. From an outsider's point of view, is the space, but it's also these 2 people, Lucy and George, keeping kind of.
I think it's because
in a very relaxed way, but you do bring, not every that ability to kind of bring people together or make us feel that, yeah, we can come here and make books and is that, and it kind of comes back to the trust and kind of trusting, you know, you trusting us, and then us sort of trusting you back, and that kind of, I think, is very important for what has happened here, and kind of for having worked out or not. And I think, going back again to the question of the pseudo, that's a very strange word for me, I've never heard, but sort of the fake participatory, or is the fact that you have to have those personal qualities, I think, as a generator or as a creator, because you're sort of creating a situation, and whereas you are taking you know, standing back, you are still keeping that situation together. So if a chaos happens here, we would probably be looking at you, sort of, Lucy, what should be done?
Yeah. I mean, you know that.
Is that sense of, so I think that is an important element, and I think not everybody has that.
But I think there's a potential because it's shared between two people. Like, I don't think I could do this by myself.
Yeah.
I know I couldn't do this by myself. And it's like, you know, it's care between each other, and like, care for the people that come in. It is to do with care, they can trust and all of those things. It's like, but also actually because you want to be here. Like, I want to be here. And I think you're really good at that. You're like, we don't need to come if we don't want to be here. Like, it doesn't have to open every Saturday. It doesn't have to do something. And it's like, and I think it took me a while to get that into my head. I was like, but you know, people are coming, we need to open it, we need to do something.
But I think we play on each other's qualities a lot. Because we have complementary qualities.
Fine.
No, but we also have complementary qualities.
Yeah.
We don't have the same qualities at all.
No, we're quite different people, so I think that works quite well.
Yeah.
So it's like,
so I know exactly where good Lucy is great, and I know where I can actually step in and go, yes, that's be fine.
But you've got that's a trust thing as well. It's like, I know, like, where I'll fall, George can pick it up.
Yes.
And it's like, where I'll get a bit like obsessive, overdoing things, it's just calm down.
But you know where I'm not feeling comfortable. Things, go.
And I'll just, there's certain
you know
things
exactly.
you just do. You're like, okay, I can do the web stuff, and I can write an email to the person and do this sort of thing.
Or even speak about it.
And speak
articulate about I hate it.
Yeah, but so therefore there's something like, and that's relaxing, which I think maybe it is like a sort of cosmic, molecular thing that passes across to people. But I think we should stop.
Yeah.
I think it's enough. Thank you. We've done an hour, dude. How do we just...
I hope that it's a bit random, but I hope that makes some sort of sense. So, where were we? What were we doing? So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to talk through one project that we've done in that space and just give you a kind of idea. I think this is probably the best way just to give you an idea about how things sort of evolve. Just to let you know that Verosi is completely unfunded. It's chosen to be completely unfunded. So therefore, there are no parameters and there are no rules. We only do this because we want to, and we only work with people because we want to work with people. We don't have to work with anyone, and we don't have to fulfill anyone else's rules, criteria, or whatever. So I'm just going to, what we tend to do, or what we have been doing at Verosi, is throwing out a loose theme and starting something called a flow. So this was our most recent flow, and it's called Flow Antennae. Generally speaking, the theme comes from somewhere in the ether, from a conversation between George and I. And we started Flow Antennae by deciding that what we would do is we'd set some parameters for play. So we would exchange images of antennae on Instagram using the hashtag FlowAntennae. This sort of went on for a few weeks, and then suddenly online this sort of accident happened, and someone put up an open call for an exhibition called on the theme of antennae, and it was half in London, and then the show was going to go to Greece. George is Greek. So we thought, brilliant, this is excellent, this is what we're going to do, the hell are we going to make for it? So we sat down at a cafe in London and we had a conversation about the fact that in Athens there are a lot of hills with a lot of antennae all over them. And we decided that what we wanted to do is that day, at that moment right now, find someone who would go to that hill, collect flowers for us and post them back to Barosi. We asked Harry, a friend of ours who happened to be in Athens. She couldn't do it, she was too busy, so we asked a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend who was walking his dog on a hill in Athens to send us some flowers. He did. He also sent us a video of himself doing it. This is Andronicus. I've never met him, but he's on a mountain called Lekapitos in Athens picking flowers that he posted to us in an envelope covered in stamps with pictures of aerials and antennae all over him. George and I then got together back in Barosi. We had about 2 hours to make an artwork for the show, so we made a poster that had a QR code on it, and that also, then we ripped an image off eBay taken by a man in America of the same hill in Athens. So we used this ripped off image from eBay, a QR code and the flowers from the actual hill to make a poster. The poster got into the exhibition in London, which was great. It didn't get into the second part of the exhibition in Athens, which wasn't so great. So the narrative sort of started to go back downhill. So then we decided, actually I realised that we would send one of the posters we'd made back to Andronicus, but we would also, my 2 friends of mine were going to Athens to see Documenta, so we've given them a poster. This is my friend Esther in Athens lining up the poster to the landscape. I didn't ask her to line up the poster to the landscape in the same way that I didn't ask Andronicus to send us a film. I did ask them to put this poster up in Athens, but I don't know if they've done it. So we'll see what happens. It kind of opens up. Then Ivan, who was in the conversation earlier. Ivan and Anna are 2 people who we've met by accident because we started this space in Palmer's Green. And they got in touch with us via Twitter because they saw the sign on the window. And Ivan has then, via Twitter, been sending me a huge amount of information about cribs and number stations that you can broadcast on radio stations. So after our lunch, the 4 of us had a lot. He brought in all these radios and transmitters and things like this. The 4 of us played around and we came up with an idea to run an event at Barosi where we're going to invite, Ivan's going to create a crib, which is a code, and we're going to invite people to submit text that they will then broadcast in the space, and we'll probably also have a potluck supper, and we'll maybe get some friends of ours in who are interested in coming to do a jam, because they did one a few weeks ago back into the space. George has ordered the slide from eBay from the man in America. We've also sent him a poster. So we've got now that slide and this kind of thing, and so we'll probably play with that slide and do something with flowers in the space. And the Instagram feed is still ongoing, and we're not quite sure when this will end. So that's kind of the way we work. And I hope that's useful, but I just thought it was maybe a way of, I think for me I worked in participation, maybe a more sort of socially engaged practice sort of way for a really long time, and I'm actually trying to unwrite myself from it, and to work with people sort of in the way that you want to work with people, not in the way that you feel like you have to. That's it. And if you want to see more stuff, go on the Saturday Museum website. That's it. I'm done.
My name is Elaine Turner. I'm a visual artist and I'm in the second year of a practice-based PhD in the School of Fine Art, History of Art and Cultural Studies here at the University of Leeds. So my practice consists of studio work, which is based in painting, curation and ongoing collaborative projects. The curatorial and collaborative aspects of my practice have a closer relationship to participation than my studio production. However, generally I don't define my practice as participatory, so I'd like to briefly set out how I relate to the term participation. The primary reason I don't consider my practice to fall easily within the category of participatory art is that it does not necessarily initiate or consist of an interaction or contribution from an audience. beyond the sort of presumed condition of a viewer or anticipation of a viewer. For this reason, even though the term participation is fairly broad and adaptable, if we accept the definition that's put forward by art critic Claire Bishop in Artificial Habits, Participatory Art and Politics of Spectatorship, published in 2012, that an artwork is participatory if people constitute the central artistic medium and material in the manner of theatre and performance, then because my practice is concerned with object and image production and is not sort of purely constituted by social interaction, it's not easily categorised as participatory. However, my PhD research looks at hospitality both as a form of art practice and a theoretical discourse. So this overlaps with many of the ethical issues that are posed by participation. As here, social interaction is explored by approaching art through the lens of issuing and accepting invites, or playing the role of host and guest. Sally Talent, the curator of the 2012 Liverpool Biennial, which took hospitality as its central theme, points to the ambivalent nature of hospitality when she suggests that conceptualizing art as host is an expression of both fear and hope, perhaps a manifestation of an awareness that identity can be occupied, and a response to a perceived loss of intimacy in our social relations. It has been argued that curation is always at first an act of hospitality, most recently by Beatrice von Bismarck and Benjamin Mayer Kramer in Cultures of the Curatorial Hospitality, Hosting Relations and Exhibitions, which was published in 2016. But I'd like to focus on a specific aspect of a recent curatorial project, which is a short film I produced in 2016 with two other artists, Bruce McLean and Eddie Farrell. So in this, I tried to explore hospitality in art by overstepping the conventional role of curator-host, by acting as a guest. So I'm trying to intervene creatively within another artist's practice, or perhaps participating in the creative process of another artist. So to give you a little bit of context, this film was part of a larger project, the APT Curatorial Fellowship, for which I worked with APT Gallery as an artist curator to produce a group exhibition and series of events. The exhibition, Ingredients, Methods, Serving Suggestion, took as a starting point the idea of the recipe, perhaps the original open source text due to its exemption from standard copyright laws, which lends it to being a particularly democratic format of sharing practical information and enabling collaboration, as recipes can be reenacted and adapted over time. The exhibition explored the idea of the recipe in terms of how artists might seek to visualise or demonstrate a production process. For example, artist Natasha Kidd produced a painting machine which was used to produce 3 new paintings over the course of the exhibition without the artist needing to physically touch them. Such artworks, which emphasise material process, were presented alongside conceptual instruction-based art. For example, 14 painters reenacted and rematerialised a Yoko Ono score from 1961 called Time Painting. So every image in the picture comes from the same linguistic instruction. The short film I'm going to show today is another example of a reenactment of a conceptual artwork from the 1960s, a piece called Underwater Watercolour by Bruce McLean. So in the context of producing this exhibition about artist recipes, I contacted McLean, who was my former painting professor at Slade School of Fine Art, and asked him if he would be willing to show me how to make an underwater watercolour. So to clarify, I'd initially presumed that this would be an impossible proposition. I'd become aware of the phrase underwater watercolour as a linguistic term or expression that McLean had used during a debate called the Troublewood Painting that was held at the ICA in 2010. And I'd understood this just as a means for McLean to be disruptive and provocative. I was interested in the idea that I might be offered a kind of bespoke art lesson by contacting McLean in a sort of seemingly impossible process of painting underwater. However, McLean replied by explaining underwater watercolour had actually existed as an artwork and proposed that we remake it in the same way in the original location. At this point, we invited in a third artist, Eddie Farrell, who both myself and McLean had previously worked with, to document the process so that it might be publicly presented. So the resulting film, Underwater Watercolours, is 11 minutes and 53 seconds long, so I'm just going to show you an extract from the middle section of the film. And as you watch it, I would like you to hold a question in your mind posed by Mary Jane Jacob in her essay, Reciprocal Generosity. And this is featured in a text called What We Want is Free, Generosity and Exchange in Recent Art, published in 2005. So she asks, how can artists be more generous and encourage an experience of their art that is more open, allowing others entry and equally appreciating their experiences? How can art be an exchange? Returning to the idea of sharing or generosity, I'd like to reflect upon this film using the criteria set out by Ted Pose, who's the editor of the publication I previously mentioned, What We Want is Free, Generosity and Exchange in Recent Art, published in 2005. So he asks, what was being offered, who was it being offered to, and is the artist offering something the audience really wants or needs? And I think there's two ways we can think about what is offered in this film. The first is the visualization of the material process. which as a technique for painting underwater, is obviously not particularly intended as a how-to instruction, as its practical applications are really limited. And details such as material choices, for example, choice of paint, that's been consciously edited out to sort of try and steer people away from repeating the process. So it's intended more as an imaginative prompt, realising an implausible process than a how-to demonstration. And I think the more important offer that it makes is sharing a narrative of co-production, or our attempt to work together as three separate artists. The question of who is this offered to is itself problematic, as it requires making assumptions about the audience. And in the context of the exhibition it was produced for at the APT Gallery, we can maybe presume that we would attract a specialist artist community, primarily comprised of art contacts, as well as hopefully appealing to the general public. But perhaps it's more useful to reframe that question in terms of specialist knowledge and ask, does this artwork require background knowledge of art or additional explanation? So there are points where we've tried to address the idea of the potential exclusion of the audience. For example, the first section of the film, which you didn't see, offers a context and explains the initial premise of what we're trying to do, primarily through the conversation between the three of us in the audio. So this specifies that the Underwater Watercolour was originally a work solely authored by Bruce McLean, which was exhibited as a black and white photograph as part of the 1969 survey exhibition at the ICA, When Attitudes Become Forms. So all the kind of factual, biographical information that you need to contextualise the artwork is shared. And in that sense, specialist background knowledge is not needed to approach the film. However, watching the film in its entirety, with the initial conversation about the original artwork and the subsequent footage or attempt to remake it, the absence of the original becomes really keenly felt. And to clarify, at no point in the entire narrative of the film is any documentation of the original artwork shared. This is the result of several factors. Firstly, documentation of McLean's original artwork is not included in the RCA exhibition catalogue. And secondly, McLean described the original artwork as lost. This may have been a deliberate act of resistance on his part, as several points in our conversation, which are included in the audio, indicate that he did not see this as a continuation of his artwork, but as a new artwork for which I was responsible. For instance, he said, "So you're making my work?" To which I replied, "Perhaps we're making it collaboratively." And he again distanced himself and encouraged me to take responsibility for it by asking, "How will you show it?" So there's a sense in which, through this reenactment, McLean is editing himself and the original artwork out of the process, through permitting myself and Abby Farrell to work with him. And this is perhaps the key point in terms of this experience or process of co-production. That what emerged was a dislocated sense of responsibility from each party. And to try and reflect the open-endedness of that, we decided to pluralise the original title so that it becomes Underwater Watercolours, indicating it as perhaps not a resolved idea, but a process that could be repeated and continued. And we also decided to include each of our names as a contributor, maintaining a link to the original, but also a degree of distance. So as a model of co-production, it's perhaps best understood as a chain of action and response. I felt responsible for the initial premise, and as curator expected to contribute to the decisions around the manner of public presentation. McLean led the reenactment, and Farrell largely constructed the narrative through the editing process. For this reason, it's perhaps fallen short of the definition of collaborations put forward by Maria Lind. So she puts forward this idea in her essay, A Collaborative Turn, that collaboration is a form of conscious partnership. And as our investment was not at all times equal, I don't think we can really describe it as conscious partnership. But I would still propose that working together enables something new to be created that otherwise couldn't be produced, but this is still dependent on the existence of the original artwork. And if we think about artists working together in the more political terms that are set out in Marcus Newson's The Nightmare of Participation, then this process again is closer to cooperation than collaboration. As we shared a common goal, and we were working mostly in agreement rather than from a position of conflicting agendas, the only distinction that could perhaps be made here in terms of initial premise was to share information, and I increasingly became aware through working with the other two artists that actually the information that was withheld was the key to the narrative being successful and enabling an imaginative space to come into operation. So through the reenactment, it became obvious that what could actually be explained about an artwork merely through repeating a process or a process of production was quite limited. One consequence of co-production is that this emphasised the uncertainty that is involved in making an artwork, and this is allowed to stay visible in the narrative as points of direct confrontation, confusion, such as McLean asking, why are we doing this anyway? And moments of distraction and diversion, as you saw, such as McLean singing, noting the calls of certain birds, and pointing out the great trees of barns. So the offer here is then perhaps documentation of artists at work, but this is perhaps more closely aligned to play than labour, and the resulting leisurely tone perhaps encourages a meditative, reflective response on the part of the viewer. The absence of the original documentation means we also avoid a direct comparison between our reenactment and the original. And this invites the audience to join us in the search for this missing original and to participate in the uncertainty of the process. And to reflect that, we decided to install the film by projecting it underwater in a fish tank, which means the work is invisible from certain angles, particularly from the front. So it responds to the elusive nature of the original artwork and it extends its literal logic. So finally, returning to the idea of participation, the audience essentially participates here in not knowing, aligning the experience of the artist, curator and audience as one of, if we're optimistic, productive uncertainty.
Section. My name is Echo. So for me, from the very beginning to now, the concept I think is missing out is the funding. So as an audience, I'd like to ask the artists here. I obviously know more artists than audience here. So my question would be, if there is no funding situation, ideally there's no funding situation, will you choose to participate any audience? Or it's an ideal situation. So if you don't have to apply for funding from anywhere, would you choose to engage any audience in your project, in your arts? And because we live in reality, so in this case, how much of the funding situation or funding system impact on your arts creation? Okay, 2 questions.